93% of people wanted to keep the automatic bids. Just another reminder of how unpopular it would be to take that away. What's the next one we're hitting on here, GP?
How many teams should be playing Division I basketball? As we've noted multiple times already, it's 363 right now. And so we asked roughly 100 coaches. We gave them options. Should it stay at the current size? Should we cut it by about 15 to 20%? Should we cut it by about 40%? Should we cut it in half or more? And more than 50% of the coaches, specifically 53.7% of the coaches, said stay at the current size, which I guess isn't surprising because some of these coaches, like, you know, they're on the wrong side of this if we start cutting. And they don't want to be on the wrong side of it.
Other coaches add to their career win totals by playing teams that are in that 3.
That's right. So I guess given that we're asking coaches this question, I shouldn't be surprised that stay at the current size was the right answer. You know, sometimes coaches vote with their own interest in mind. In fact, often I would assume they vote with their own interest in mind. From a fan perspective, I would cut it. I would like to cut it to about, I don't know that there's a perfect number. I actually went through it the other day and I was like, well, if you cut here, you're leaving out, like, that's a pretty good program. That's a pretty good program. But I think around 200 teams should be playing Division I basketball. There was one coach who I believe gave this quote. It's my mind is so jumbled on this stuff. I can't remember if a coach gave me this quote or gave you this quote, but I think it's you. The quote is this, and this I believe that this is I could have wrote this. I'd say cut the bottom third. I hate coaching in those crappy games, let alone if I had to actually play in them.
This is yours. I did not get this one.
I am sure a lot of coaches like them because they are easy wins and they can pad their record, but I find it to be a complete waste of everyone's time when a high major team and a 250-plus KenPom team play a 40-point blowout. And I couldn't agree with that more. The more Division I teams you have, the more bad games you're going to get in the non-league portion of the schedule. And I think that is one of the real problems facing college basketball, is that if you are a Kentucky fan or a North Carolina fan or a Duke fan, most of your non-league games, so basically everything you're watching in November and December, like if those teams are what they're supposed to be, most of the games are going to be lopsided. And like you compare it to the NBA, literally roughly half your games are going to be against quote unquote playoff teams over an 82 game regular season schedule. And in college basketball, if you're truly great, if you're a great team, a lot of your games are going to be against absolute crap. And it's just not interesting for anybody. I would love a situation where we got rid of, and I don't know that you cut it strictly by conference, because like you start cutting conferences, you leave like good programs out. But if there were a way, because I started going through like conference standings, and it's like, okay, we're obviously keeping the Big 12, SEC, Big 10, Big East, ACC, Pac-12, Mountain West, American Athletic Conference, West Coast Conference. So now I'm already up to 9. Atlantic 10, we got to keep that. Missouri Valley, got to keep that. Southern Conference, got to keep that. Good programs in there. Conference USA, gotta keep that. CAA, I think, like, you get into this place where if you start cutting anywhere around here, it's like, well, who did we just leave out from the Sun Belt? Who did we just leave out from the Summit League? Who did we just leave out from the OVC? So I don't think you can just cut, like, let's cut the bottom 6 leagues or the bottom 8 leagues or the bottom 10 leagues. You leave some really proud programs out. But if there were a way to consolidate, take the top 200 programs in America, sort them in conferences in some way, and let's call that Division I basketball, I would like that, because fundamentally, I think it's insane that North Carolina and North Carolina A&T are theoretically competing for the same national championship. That's silly.
Some would say that's an amazing feature of D1 basketball, though.
I would say it's silly.
I know. Some would say that's actually an appealing nature to it, even if NCAA is never going to win a national championship. I get all that. There was a coach who did tell me basketball is the only college sport in the country where every school plays. And there's something to that. It's the only one. Every single college institution, to my knowledge, and in the NCAA, D1, D2, D3 fields a basketball team for men's and women's.
What about Georgetown?
Okay. Ouch.
Ouch. I'm joking.
So there is something to that. Also, 363 schools means, with the exception of the Ivies, you have all these people that are on scholarship, free college education. And there's something to that, which isn't to say that, if you weren't D1, you couldn't still afford scholarships. But the reason why this question is asked is also because of the Transformation Committee. So here's a little bit of quick exposition on this question, why this was asked and how it pertains to the one we just talked about. The Transformation Committee is going to try and determine what it means to be a Division I institution and what it means to field teams at the D1 level, be it football or basketball or volleyball or ice hockey and all this stuff. The conference situation is going to prevent an outright we're going to go from 363 to 295 and that's the number. That's not going to happen. The conferences will prevent that from happening. But what might happen, I'm not saying it will happen, but what might happen is that the Transformation Committee could come to some kind of plan and say, okay, we're not going to outright kick anyone out of Division I. Every single team that's in Division I will get to stay there, because you got to qualify to get in. You got to get through the hoops and all that stuff. But once you're in, no matter how embarrassingly low your budget might be. I mean, there are definitely hangers on. There's no doubt about it. We're in agreement. It's too big. My number is about 300, maybe 290 or so. It's too big, but whatever. Don't let anyone else in Division I as far as I'm concerned. But the Transformation Committee could say, okay, we're going to have certain thresholds. So maybe you break up Division I into 2 tiers. Maybe you break it up into 3 tiers and say you're in the top tier if you're in one of these leagues and you have an athletic budget or a basketball budget that meets this threshold. You're in tier 2 if you can't quite get there, but you have these many resources to put toward it. You're going to be put in tier 2, and if you're anyone else, then you're in tier 3. Why would they do this? Well, there's a few different factors as to why they would do it. But I cynically happen to believe that this winds up being the workaround to reducing the number of automatic bids in the NCAA tournament, so that they can say, for AQ status in the basketball tournament, you need to either be playing in tier 1 or tier 2. If you're a tier 3 designated team over the next year, 3 years, however they want to create that kind of window, you can play your way in. If you can make the financial commitment and prove, then you can come up to tier 2. But otherwise, you're tier 3 and you don't qualify for the NCAA tournament. Maybe you qualify for the NIT or any other kind of tournament, but that's what I think could be potentially on the table here. Do I think it's right? No. I think if they were to do that, I think this is a huge undertaking, and I don't even know if we're going to get to this point. We might look up in 5 years. D1 is still 363 or 368 teams, however big it wants to get, and it remains the status quo. But if I'm looking at a way that the Transformation Committee could literally legislate in rules to keep out, 3 AQs from low major leagues, maybe 5 or 6, just shave those off. Let's just get them out of here. We'll keep it at 68. But you know what? 4 or 5 leagues, don't know what to tell you. We redefined what D1 is, and you're not there right now. And so we'll just replace those with at-large bids. I think that is one possible avenue here, because the task of the Transformation Committee is to push the NCAA into, the modern era as best as it possibly can, and streamline this process, reduce the rule book, and redefine what it means to be a D1 institution. And one quick aside with all this, oh, by the way, there was a summit yesterday that happened in DC with Lead One, which is a bunch of people that work in college sports and advisors and all that. And surprise, there will be no breakaway by the power conference schools from the NCAA. That's not happening. I've always been very cynical that would ever happen. There's no momentum to do that, because if you do that, you create your own NCAA. And the news and chatter coming out of that was like, there's no desire on behalf of presidents or athletic directors to actually break away from the NCAA, because if you do that, you take on a whole bunch of your own new problems. So the idea that maybe if we cut D1 and it was just the top 8 leagues that broke away, that's Fantasyland stuff. That's just not going to happen. It's not pragmatic. It's not logical. And so that's where we are with all this. One last tidbit on this, and then it's all yours, GP. I was told that Jim Phillips, the ACC commissioner, told ACC coaches back during their spring meetings that, any kind of significant change to how power conferences operate within this structure of the NCAA, like that's not getting altered, if at all, until the tournament contract runs out in 2032. So while there might be some tweaks coming in the next few years, I think any widespread transcendent redefining of what D1 is, if and when this gets decided, this is a long project. This will have a long run out. But that's why we asked the question, because they're actually trying to decide how they're going to reclassify, if reclassify at all, what teams are D1 or not D1. But I would cut it down. I would cut it down by about 15%.